"We're moving in Friday," my sister announced via text message. Mom already agreed. I grabbed my phone. Alarm system armed. Doorbell camera recording. And then my phone lit up, intruder alert, police dispatched. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. Most people would have read a text like that and panicked. They would have called their mother screaming about boundaries or sent a long emotional paragraph to their sister begging for respect. But I don't do panic. I am a data security analyst for a Fortune 500 company. My entire career is built on identifying threats, assessing liabilities, and neutralizing breaches before they can compromise the system. And at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, I didn't see a family message. I saw a phishing attempt. I saw an unauthorized login request trying to brute force its way into my life. I didn't reply. Engaging with a threat actor only validates their access. Instead, I set my phone on the nightstand and picked up my tablet. I opened the smart home app for my historic Chicago brownstone. I tapped the shield icon. Lockdown mode initiated. The heavy steel shutters on the garden-level windows hummed as they lowered into place. The electronic deadbolts on the front and rear doors clicked, engaging the secondary steel pins. The motion sensors in the courtyard calibrated to high sensitivity. My home isn't just a house. It is a secure facility. I bought this place 18 months ago, gut-renovated the interior, and wired every square inch of it myself. It was my sanctuary, my server room, and the only place on earth where the chaos of my family couldn't reach me. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Destiny. Then a missed call from my mother, Lisa. Then a notification from a group chat I didn't remember asking to be part of. I treated them exactly like I treat malware alerts. I swiped left, delete, block temporarily, isolate the infected files. I walked downstairs to the garden level. This was the space Destiny was talking about. She called it the guest suite. My mother called it the spare apartment. They were both wrong. It was my workspace. It housed 3 server racks, a cooling system, and 4 monitors displaying real-time data streams that required a top-secret security clearance to even look at. It wasn't a place for my 23-year-old sister to film TikToks, and it certainly wasn't a crash pad for her boyfriend Caleb, a man who looked like he stole catalytic converters for a hobby. I sat at my desk and pulled up the contact information for my security contractor. It was midnight, but I sent the email anyway, marking it urgent. I needed the rear garden gate reinforced. The vintage wrought iron looked nice, but it was a vulnerability. I authorized a rush fee. I authorized the overtime. I didn't care about the cost. My family thought they were dealing with the old Samantha, the one who apologized for taking up space, the one who kept the peace to avoid a fight. They didn't realize that version of me had been deprecated years ago. They thought they were coming for a sleepover, but they were walking straight into a firewall. I looked at the monitors, watching the green status lights blink in the dark. The perimeter was secure. Let them come. I wasn't running a halfway house. I was running a fortress. The next morning, the financial demands arrived. They didn't even wait for me to agree to the move-in. Destiny sent a Venmo request at 6:30 a.m. for $4,500. The memo line just said, moving expenses and lease break fee. I stared at the number on my screen. $4,500. That wasn't a request for help. It was an invoice. Destiny hadn't just decided to move in. She had already detonated her previous life, assuming I would pay for the cleanup. She had sublet her luxury apartment in the city illegally, I suspected, and was now trying to bill me for the cost of her own irresponsibility. She called it family support. I called it what it was, a ransom note. This was the moment the pattern usually kicked in. The old Samantha, the version of me that existed before I bought this brownstone, would have paid it. I would have sighed, transferred the money, and told myself I was being a good big sister. I would have moved my server racks into storage to make room for her vintage clothes. I would have compromised my own security to protect her from the consequences of her chaos. But as I sat there, drinking my coffee, looking at the gray morning light filtering through the steel shutters, I realized something profound. For 30 years, I had been operating under a hidden contract. I call it the contract of existence. Most children are born into a family and are loved simply because they exist. Their presence is enough. But for me, existence had a subscription fee. My parents, Lisa and Jeffrey, had conditioned me to believe that my place at the table wasn't a birthright. It was a rental agreement, and the currency I paid with was compliance. If I fixed Destiny's grades, I paid my rent for the month. If I lent my dad money for his investments that never paid out, I renewed my lease on their affection. If I stayed quiet, solved problems, and absorbed the stress so Destiny didn't have to, I was allowed to stay in the family. I wasn't a daughter. I was a tenant. And Destiny, she was the landlord's favorite pet, allowed to wreck the furniture while I got billed for the damages. I looked at the Venmo request again. $4,500. That was the price of my lease renewal this month. It was the cost of keeping the peace. It was the fee for pretending we were a normal, loving family instead of a parasitic system feeding off a single host. I didn't decline the request. I blocked the user. It felt terrifying, like cutting a wire without knowing if it would defuse the bomb or detonate it. But the clarity was absolute. I wasn't just saying no to a roommate. I was defaulting on the contract. I was stopping the payments. I knew exactly what would happen next. When a tenant stops paying rent, the landlord doesn't just get annoyed. They try to evict you. They try to destroy your credit. They come for everything you have. My mother, Lisa, called at 7 a.m. Then my father, Jeffrey. Then Destiny again. I watched the notifications stack up on my lock screen like a denial of service attack. They weren't calling to check on me. They were calling because the transaction had failed. The ATM had stopped dispensing cash, and they were kicking the machine. I finished my coffee and walked over to the server rack in the corner of the studio. The fans hummed a steady, reassuring drone. This wasn't a guest room. This was the brain of my operation. And I wasn't a tenant anymore. I was the owner. And today, I was issuing an eviction notice to the past. 48 hours later, the threat actors arrived on site. My security system pinged at 10:47 a.m. on Friday. Motion detected courtyard gate. I didn't get up from my desk. I simply pulled up the camera feed on my third monitor. They hadn't rented a U-Haul. That would have been too practical for Destiny. Instead, a sleek branded white glove movers van was double parked in the alley behind my brownstone. It was the kind of service that cost $3,000 just to show up money. Destiny definitely didn't have, which meant the invoice was likely addressed to me. Destiny stepped out of the passenger seat. She wasn't dressed for moving boxes. She was dressed for content. Oversized sunglasses, a beige athleisure set that cost more than my first car, and a venti iced coffee. Behind her trailed Caleb, her boyfriend. He looked less like a partner and more like an accessory she had bought on clearance, shifty bored and wearing a hoodie in July. They approached the rear garden gate. This was the vulnerability I had patched on Tuesday. The vintage iron latch was gone, replaced by a reinforced steel deadlock with a biometric keypad. Destiny punched in a code. The keypad flashed red. She tried again, red. She tried a third time, jamming her acrylic nail into the buttons. The mechanism didn't budge. Access denied. I watched on the high-definition monitor as the realization hit her. She wasn't just locked out. She was irrelevant. A normal person would have called their sister. A normal person would have knocked. But Destiny was an aspiring lifestyle influencer with 12,000 followers and an addiction to validation. When reality refused to give her what she wanted, she decided to edit the footage. She pulled a ring light out of her tote bag. She clipped it to her phone. She fixed her hair, checked her angles, and hit go live. I unmuted the audio feed on my console. Her voice, shrill and performative, filled my quiet workspace. "Hey guys," she said, her voice trembling with practiced fragility. "I didn't want to do this, but I'm literally shaking right now. We just drove 3 hours to move into my sister's place because she begged us to come stay, and now she's changed the codes. We are literally homeless right now." I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, taking a sip of water. It was a fascinating study in real-time narrative manipulation. She was weaponizing her audience, trying to use public shame to brute force a physical lock. The comments started rolling in on her screen. I could see the reflection in her sunglasses. "Your sister is toxic," they said. "Call the cops," they said. Then the cracks in the story appeared. Caleb, who clearly hadn't rehearsed the script, leaned into the frame. "Babe, the movers are charging by the hour. We gotta get in. We already gave the keys to the subletter." I froze. I hit the record button on my security console. "Shut up, Caleb," Destiny hissed, covering the microphone, but the high-gain audio on my camera picked it up perfectly. "We didn't just give them the keys," Caleb argued, his voice rising. "We took the cash deposit. If we don't get in here, we have nowhere to go. You said she was a pushover." There it was. the payload. They hadn't just come for a visit. They had illegally sublet their luxury apartment in the city, taken a cash bribe from the new tenants, and torched their own living situation on the gamble that I would fold. They weren't guests. They were squatters who had burned their own bridge before they even reached mine. Destiny turned back to the phone, plastering the smile back on. Sorry guys, connection issues. Just, please tag my sister. Tell her family shouldn't do this to family. I saved the clip. I labeled the file Evidence Destiny Admission 01. She wanted a viral moment. She wanted to drag our private business into the public square. Fine. I believed in transparency. I uploaded the footage to my secure cloud storage. They weren't getting in, but they had just given me the ammunition to make sure they never would. The reinforcements arrived 40 minutes later. My mother, Lisa, drove her SUV up onto the curb, blocking the bike lane. My father, Jeffrey, jumped out before the engine cut. He wasn't wearing his usual golf attire. He was wearing his business closer suit. He looked like a man coming to hostilely take over a company, which, in a way, he was. They didn't waste time ringing the doorbell. They went straight to the keypad on the garden gate. Jeffrey punched in a code, my old birthday. Access denied. He punched in my social security number. Access denied. He rattled the gate, testing the hinges, looking for a physical vulnerability. Watching them on my monitors, I felt a strange clinical detachment. In behavioral psychology, there is a concept called an extinction burst. It explains what happens when you stop reinforcing a conditioned behavior. If you put $1 in a vending machine and the soda doesn't come out, you don't just walk away. You push the button harder. You shake the machine. You scream at it. You escalate your behavior dramatically in a desperate attempt to force the old system to work one last time. My family was in the middle of a textbook extinction burst. For 30 years I had been their vending machine. I had dispensed money, labor, and compliance on demand. Now that I was out of order, they weren't accepting the new reality. They were trying to tip the machine over. Jeffrey pulled out his phone. I assumed he was calling me, but my phone stayed silent. 5 minutes later, a white van pulled up. Al's 24-hour locksmith. I sat up straighter. This wasn't just a tantrum anymore. This was social engineering. It is one of the most effective hacking techniques in existence because it exploits human empathy rather than software code. I turned up the gain on the exterior microphones. She's having a breakdown, Jeffrey was telling the locksmith, his voice thick with fabricated worry. We haven't heard from her in days. She changed the codes in a manic state. We just need to get in there to do a wellness check. I'm the owner. I co-signed the loan. It was a brilliant lie. It relied on the locksmith's desire to be a hero to help a worried father save his daughter. The locksmith nodded, pulling a heavy drill out of his van. He was about to drill out my biometric lock based on a sob story. I didn't run upstairs. I didn't scream. I simply engaged the exterior PA system. My voice, amplified and crisp, echoed through the courtyard like the voice of God. Attention, I said. This conversation is being recorded and streamed to off-site cloud storage. The locksmith froze. Jeffrey looked up at the camera, his face twisting from concern to rage. I am the sole owner of this property. I continued reading from the deed document I had pulled up on my second monitor. The individuals at the gate have been trespassed. If you attempt to bypass that lock, sir, you are committing a felony, breaking and entering, and you will lose your license. I have already logged your license plate number, Illinois plate 472 Romeo Yankee X-ray. The locksmith looked at the camera, then at Jeffrey. The spell of social engineering shattered instantly against the hard wall of liability. You said you were the owner, the locksmith said, packing his drill back into the case. I am her father, Jeffrey shouted, dropping the act. She's mentally unstable. She sounds pretty stable to me, buddy, the locksmith said. He got in his van and drove away without looking back. My father stood there, red-faced and impotent, shaking the steel bars of my gate. The extinction burst had peaked. He had tried force, he had tried manipulation, he had tried fraud, and the fortress had held. But as I watched Destiny whisper something into his ear, pointing at the keypad, I realized the attack surface was about to change. They were done trying to break in. Now they were going to try to burn me down. The noise outside had become a physical assault. My father was kicking the bottom of the gate. My mother was wailing loud enough for the neighbors 3 houses down to hear. Destiny was narrating her own victimization to her live stream. But inside the studio, the silence was absolute. I wasn't watching the family anymore. My eyes were locked on the third monitor focused on the anomaly in the system. Caleb. While Jeffrey played the outraged patriarch and Destiny played the damsel, Caleb was pacing. He wasn't looking at the house, he was looking at the street. He was checking his watch. He looked like a man who knew he was running out of time. In my line of work, we call that a tell. I minimized the camera feed and opened a new terminal window. I didn't use Google. Google is for amateurs. I used a proprietary background investigation tool, the kind used to vet contractors for government sites. I typed in Caleb's full name, which I had pulled from a piece of mail Destiny had foolishly posted on her Instagram story 2 weeks ago. The search bar spun for 3 seconds. Then the screen flooded with red text. Flagged active indictment, State of Illinois versus Caleb Miller. I scrolled through the docket. It wasn't a parking ticket. It wasn't a misdemeanor. It was 3 counts of felony grand larceny and 1 count of aggravated identity theft. He was currently out on bail awaiting trial, and according to the bail conditions listed at the bottom of the PDF, he was prohibited from leaving the state of Illinois. I sat back, the cold air from the server cooling system hitting my neck. The picture snapped into focus. They weren't just homeless. They were fugitives. They hadn't come to visit, they were fleeing jurisdiction, and they had brought that liability to my doorstep. But the realization that hit me next was far colder and far more dangerous. It wasn't about my safety. It was about my survival. I hold a top-secret sensitive compartmented information clearance. It is the golden ticket of my career. It requires continuous vetting. Every 5 years, federal investigators interview my neighbors, check my finances, and audit my associations. There is a specific adjudicative guideline regarding personal conduct and association with criminal elements. If I allowed a man with active felony fraud charges to establish residency in my home, if I let him receive mail here, if I let him sleep under my roof, I would be flagged as an insider threat. My clearance would be suspended immediately. My employment contract would be voided. I would lose the 6-figure career I had spent a decade building. I would be unhireable in my field. My family wasn't just asking for a room, they were asking me to commit career suicide. I unmuted the exterior microphone. The sound of my mother's sobbing filled the room. I pressed the talk button, overriding their noise. "Destiny," I said. My voice was calm, metallic through the speakers. "Look at the camera." Outside, Destiny stopped fake crying. She looked up, squinting against the sun. "Did you know?" I asked. "Did you know Caleb is currently out on bail for 3 counts of felony identity theft?" Beside her, Caleb flinched. He pulled his hoodie up, turning away from the lens. "He didn't do it," Destiny screamed, her voice shrill. "It's a misunderstanding, and so what? Who cares about his record? You have plenty of money. You can help him get a lawyer." The air left my lungs. She knew. She knew he was a felon. She knew he was fleeing the state. "If a felon lives at this address," I said, speaking slowly so even she could understand, "I lose my federal security clearance. I lose my job. I lose everything I have built. Did you know that?" Destiny rolled her eyes. I saw it in high definition. "Oh my God, Samantha, you are so dramatic. You're smart. You'll find another job. Just open the gate. We have nowhere else to go." There it was. The final data point. The complete corruption of the file. She wasn't ignorant of the cost. She was indifferent to it. She was willing to burn my entire life to the ground just to keep her boyfriend warm for a few months. I closed the background check window. I opened the folder marked Local Law Enforcement. "You're right," I said. "You have nowhere to go, but Caleb does." My father, Jeffrey, didn't handle the rejection well. He did exactly what the extinction burst theory predicted. When the psychological manipulation failed, he resorted to physical force. He went to his SUV, pulled out a tire iron, and marched back to the garden gate. "I am saving you from yourself," he shouted, swinging the metal bar against the reinforced steel. The sound was horrific, metal screeching against metal, the expensive powder coating chipping away with every blow. He wasn't saving me. He was trying to break the lock so he could regain control. I didn't flinch. I just watched the monitor and logged the damage. Gate structural integrity compromised. Estimated repair cost $3,200. I picked up my phone and dialed 911. "Active break-in in progress," I said calmly. "Perpetrator is armed with a crowbar. I am a single female alone in the property." The police response time was under 4 minutes. When the blue lights washed over the courtyard walls, the dynamic shifted instantly. Jeffrey dropped the tire iron. My mother, Lisa, immediately crumpled into a weeping heap on the sidewalk. Destiny put her phone away. They switched masks in unison, transforming from aggressors into terrified, concerned family members. I watched from the window as two officers approached. My father met them halfway, hands raised in a gesture of helplessness. "Thank God you're here," I heard him say through the microphones. "My daughter is inside. She's having a psychotic break. She's locked herself in. We were trying to get to her before she hurts herself." It was a compelling performance. The officers looked at the gate, then at the house. They were buying it. This was the moment I was supposed to be afraid. This was the moment the old Samantha would have opened the door crying, begging them to believe her. Instead, I picked up my tablet. I walked to the front door, disengaged the deadlock, and stepped out onto the porch. The courtyard fell silent. I wasn't wearing pajamas. I wasn't crying. I was wearing a blazer and holding a tablet like a shield. "Ma'am," the older officer asked, hand resting near his belt. "Are you okay?" "I am perfectly fine, officer," I said, my voice steady. "I am the sole owner of this property. These people are trespassing." "She's not lucid," my mother wailed. "She thinks we're enemies." I walked past my mother as if she were a ghost. I handed the tablet to the officer. "This is high-definition video of that man attacking my gate with a tire iron 3 minutes ago. That is destruction of property." The officer watched the clip. His posture stiffened. He looked at Jeffrey, then back at the screen. And I continued swiping to the next file. "That man in the hoodie is Caleb Miller. I believe if you run his ID, you will find he is currently violating his bail conditions by leaving the state of Illinois to evade 3 counts of felony fraud." The silence that followed was absolute. Caleb tried to back away toward the van, but the second officer was already moving. "Sir, stay right there," the officer commanded. "It's a mistake," Destiny shrieked, grabbing Caleb's arm. "She hacked his files. She's crazy." "ID, sir. Now." The background check took 30 seconds. The radio crackled. "Active warrant. Flight risk." The handcuffs clicked. It was the loudest sound in the world. As they marched Caleb toward the cruiser, Destiny screaming obscenities at me, my father stood frozen. He looked at the tire iron on the ground, then at me. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. He realized he wasn't the authority figure anymore. He was just a vandal on my property. "Miss Travers," the older officer said, handing me back my tablet. "Do you want to press charges for the gate?" I looked at my father. I looked at the man who had taught me that love was conditional and compliance was mandatory. "Yes," I said, "I want to press charges, and I want them all trespassed from the property immediately." 30 days later, the quiet was the first thing I noticed. The mover's van was gone, the screaming was gone, the chaos was gone. The legal fallout had been precise and devastating. My father pleaded guilty to misdemeanor vandalism to avoid a trial. The restraining order against all 3 of them was granted for 5 years, citing the break-in attempt and the threat to my federal employment. Caleb was currently awaiting extradition back to Illinois. I walked down to the garden-level studio. The evening sun cast long shadows across the floor. I sat at my desk and looked at the security panel on the wall. For years, every time my phone buzzed, my stomach had clenched. Every time I saw my mother's name, I prepared for a guilt trip. Every time I saw my father's name, I prepared for a demand. But now the panel showed a single steady color, solid green, system armed, perimeter secure. I realized then that I hadn't built these walls to keep love out. I had built them to keep the chaos away, so that I could finally hear myself think. I had spent 30 years paying rent for a family that never truly let me move in. But the lease was broken. The eviction was final. I opened the folder on my desktop labeled Family Obligations. I selected all files. I hit delete. If you've ever had to build a fortress to protect your peace, share this story. You are not alone.